Welcome to the Crypto Compliance Podcast by GateNox.
This is Crypto Compliance by GateNox, where compliance experts and practitioners are meeting to talk about current market events and general compliance aspects. My name is Pawel Kuskowski. I am the host of this show. Today we have a special guest, Lili Infante. Lili is the CEO of Cat Labs, company building crypto assets recovery and cybersecurity tools to fight crypto crime. She's a former special agent, U.S. Department of Justice. She spent there 10 years. Lili pioneered the first official cyber investigation task force focusing on the use of cryptocurrencies, violating of the U.S. anti-money laundering laws and Controlled Substance Act. She has special focus on dark web and blockchain analysis. In this episode, we spoke about the size of crypto-related crime, trends and developments in the use of crypto in the context of criminal activity, how the investigation looks like in the crypto world, and cooperation between agency and market participants. In crypto compliance, we promote the highest compliance standards, bring in interesting topics, and talk about practical issues. This podcast is sponsored by GateNox. GateNox is the fast network and tailored corporate compliance solution. With GateNox, you can onboard corporate clients by working in a trusted and compliance ecosystem with Web3 capabilities. Please also check our website, gatenox.com. Hi, Lili. How are you? Welcome.
Hello, very good. How are you?
Very good. Welcome in Crypto Compliance. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, I've been very much looking forward to our call, our podcast. After we met in Cambridge, I think, that's very, hearing your experience and what you were saying during the panels, it sounds like your experience is very relevant to, from the, let's say, compliance perspective, to close the loop in terms of understanding what's happening after we in compliance do something and we discover something, how it fits into the broader world. But before we jump into this, you've been the special agent at the Department of Justice for a number of years. So very, very exciting, and when I said to a couple of people that we're going to have this recording, it's like, oh, that's great. It's going to be a really fantastic one. So can you provide an overview of your role as a special agent at the Department of Justice and the specific responsibility you had in pioneering the crypto investigation task force?
Absolutely. So my general role as a special agent, I was particularly assigned to DEA, which is the agency under Department of Justice. My primary role was to enforce the controlled substances and money laundering, anti-money laundering laws of the United States. And I found myself focusing specifically on cryptocurrency-enabled crime, specifically as it related to Controlled Substances Act and anti-money laundering laws. And then as time went on, because I did end up pioneering a task force that included several agencies in the task force, we ended up having kind of different mission statements and touching on a lot of different types of crimes that came out of cryptocurrency as it exploded into the mainstream and as it evolved since it first started and its first kind of use case on the dark web back in 2012 when it was 2011, 2012, when it emerged as a payment method on Silk Road, which was one of the first dark web markets when criminals were using cryptocurrency to buy and sell illicit goods and services on these markets. So I started out in the cryptocurrency space because I was actually put into a money laundering group at first after graduating from the academy, and I learned everything there is to know about how traditional money laundering organizations operate. So these money laundering organizations launder funds specifically for large criminal global enterprises like drug cartels, terrorist organizations. And they really utilize very similar techniques, and they kind of rinse and repeat the same techniques. So it's pretty easy to learn what kinds of techniques they utilize, and then tailor an investigative approach to those techniques. But what I learned back early when I first started is that it was very expensive and very risky for them to launder money. And it takes about 30% of or more of a criminal organization's revenue as a cost just to launder money. So the cost of laundering money is very high in money terms, but it's also very high in terms of how risky it is, because walking around with a duffel bag full of money is not exactly discreet. So it's they get arrested all the time, and the utilization of different techniques like money mules and shell accounts a lot of times are very suspicious, and they also touch the traditional banking system, which has pretty strict anti-money laundering regulations that they have to abide by. So cryptocurrency to me seemed like the perfect way to launder money back when I first started and I first learned about cryptocurrency and the technology. So I figured that when the criminals get the memo, they're going to start using it to launder money. At the time, they weren't really as much. But when they get the memo, they're really going to start using it because of how quickly and efficiently and cheaply you can transfer value across borders and anonymously if you know how to do it right. So that's why I kind of dedicated my life to specifically cryptocurrency investigations and ended up pioneering a first task force on a federal level back then to focus on these kinds of crimes, not just money laundering, but just any kind of crime that occurred that was cryptocurrency enabled. So the task force that I pioneered had several agencies in it. It was DEA, FBI, HSI, U.S. Postal Inspection Service, other agencies as well, and state and local departments too. And all we did was focus on cryptocurrency-enabled crimes. And another reason I also dedicated my life to that specific task or focus within the DOJ was because I actually love the technology and I wanted to help clean it up. I actually believe the technology is revolutionary and extremely useful for humanity overall, and I think for the future of humanity. And I think fighting the bad actors that exploit the technology is a very important part of allowing it to grow.
And obviously, I guess you have a lot of questions, or you had a lot of questions around, is cryptocurrency actually used for, money laundering only, or, like from your perspective, what's I think, two components to these questions, like how much of crypto is being used in money laundering overall, and then how much within the crypto, how much you think is actually connected with illicit activity. I think definition of illicit activity would be criminal activity, with exceptions to tax evasion, because this is, I think, another bucket of crime. So what's your experience here?
So this statistic is very, very hard to pin down because you can see a lot of the on-chain analytics that many on-chain analytics companies provide in terms of metrics to figure out how much crypto is being used for criminal activity, or the percentage of crypto that's being used for criminal activity or money laundering. And it's very, very difficult to actually figure this out just with on-chain data. There's a lot of different factors that you have to take into account. And one of the main factors is many money laundering operations, the way that they work, especially with cash businesses like drug trafficking, for example, where a lot of the drug money ends up as cash on the streets. And the money laundering techniques involve taking the cash off the streets and laundering it and integrating into the banking system and making it, and essentially cleaning it and making it seem legit. So cryptocurrency has been used for this purpose because it's a lot easier to transfer that cash, or take that cash, put it in crypto, and transfer it across borders than it is to use traditional banking system that is a lot more regulated. So these kinds of transactions where it's cash to crypto, you can't really attribute them on the blockchain to criminal activity. You can't really see, you don't understand that it's criminal activity. They just look like transactions. So it's a very difficult number to pin down, but from what I understand, it's very similar to fiat and the percentage of fiat that's being used for criminal activity. So I think the number is about maybe 2 to 5% of global GDP. So I think it's very similar in crypto. It's not a lot more. But what I will say is that criminal organizations are now turning to crypto a lot more than they used to, and exponentially a lot more than they used to launder money. It's not just dark web. It's not just cybercrime anymore. We have malicious state actors that use it to finance their operations. We have terrorist groups that use it to fund their operations as well and launder money. We have drug cartels that are turning to crypto. And one of the main reasons is with the advent of stablecoins. Stablecoins are now extremely popular and liquid and on several chains. And very cheaply, you can transfer value across borders with stablecoins without having to worry about volatility that used to come with, let's say, Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies that changed in value. So it's a very attractive way for criminals to launder money. So with that said, we do have to take note of this change in criminal money laundering behavior, and because it is a national security problem for not just the United States, but the world. And we have to make sure that we invest in techniques and tools to be able to combat these new threats that are coming out. It's not crypto that's inherently bad, of course. It's that it's starting to get used by a lot of these criminal organizations, and we need to make sure that we're ready for that.
I think, you touched on really interesting points, so I completely agree with, I think, statistically, and I remember this during my CoinFirm time, but when we were building the model for blockchain analytics, then we applied almost the same, red flags, principles, different, methodologies that we had in traditional banking. And we end up with very similar, kind of 2 to 5% of the illicit funds or bad actors. I think this is also, like how society is being spread, but effectively you have around 5% on average, or 2 to 5% of bad people in the society, which suffers a lot. Which provides, suffering a lot to the rest. So, that's something which is, very interesting. And, thanks for saying this, because I think that's important. Another point is, you touched on cooperation, international cooperation. And again, I think, that's one of the biggest challenge in crypto is the international aspect. I think, when we think about crypto, we think about global operation immediately from the start. This is not something which is like, we're just going to do, one market, right? Because the funds will be coming from different locations, wallets will be registered in different locations, and we're dealing with global market immediately. But what I found is, if we have event, and we had a couple of interesting cases for large amounts, but one of them would be, let's say, in Australia happening, then funds transferred to the UK, then to ended up in Binance in Singapore, or wherever, right? And then it's very difficult to recover. It's finding this jurisdiction, and cooperation is an understanding also, is, I think it's improving right now, but understanding between these different governments and agencies is different. How do you see, what was the cooperation level when you were in DOJ? Between,
cooperation.
US and international aspect.
So collaboration between agencies within the US is very important, first of all, because different agencies within the US have different mission statements and also different resources. For example, IRS is very, very good at tracing the money. So if you don't have IRS on your case, then you're missing out a lot. So it's very important to especially when you're doing a very large investigation that spans the world, to have several agencies at least in the US, on the case. And also it prevents a lot of kind of contentious blue on blue scenarios where agents fight over cases and say, no, this is my case, stay away. Thankfully, there's not a lot of those, but sometimes that happens. So it's a lot better to just, do this in a collaborative manner. And I was lucky enough to have the task force. So every time that we did a case, we would involve every agency that was within the task force. So it was a really great way to do these kinds of cases. When it comes to international collaboration, it's even more important. Like you said, money moves to different jurisdictions, and not just money. Sometimes, especially if you're doing a dark web case, you don't know where your target is. You don't know where the dark web market is hosted. You don't know who the administrators of the dark web market are, or who the other co-conspirators are. Many times they don't even know each other, and they're all in different jurisdictions, different countries. So it's very important to have those relationships with other countries and with other law enforcement agencies when we are conducting these kinds of investigations, especially that span the global sphere. And in my experience, that's been the case with Europol and other investigative agencies in Europe and the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Asia even. And it gets very, very difficult when you don't have a relationship with another country to actually be able to progress the case. Sometimes it's a dead end. If, let's say, your target is in a jurisdiction that you don't have a good relationship with that country and you can't really get information, or you can't give them information, or their government is so corrupt that they'll tip off, the target, especially if the target is a big target, and that the target is a lot of times will be collaborating with the government, paying them off not to touch them and allow them to continue their criminal activity. This happens a lot in countries that have pervasive corruption. So definitely very important to have international collaboration. The United States is lucky to have really, really good relationships with a lot of the countries that we collaborate with. So it makes it easier. Some countries don't have that, which is a pity, but we just make do with what we can, right?
And from your experience, how has the landscape of cryptocurrency-related crime evolved during your tenure in the DOJ? Have you noticed any trends, any changes over the years?
Absolutely, it's completely night and day from when I started. I started around 2012, 2013. And back then it was most of the crypto criminal activity and money laundering activity was really focused on dark web and cybercrime. And it was mostly just Bitcoin. And then we had Litecoin, I guess that was created a little bit later, a couple of years after Bitcoin. And then we had Monero in 2014 that was created as a privacy coin. And then,
did you
so
see
at that point, like back then, it was a lot.
Did you see a lot of Monero being used? Because for
not
me,
when it was, not when it was first created, actually, because Monero has a pretty high technical barrier to entry, and it had also low liquidity. So if you're a large criminal organization and you're trying to launder money or do something bad, it's very difficult, or at least it was very difficult to use Monero. Just because of the way it works, it's very kind of cumbersome, and the liquidity was not there at the time. Now it's a lot more popular. Yes, it's a lot more popular, especially on dark web markets. But still, for traditional money laundering by traditional criminal organizations, and when I say traditional, I mean non-cyber or dark web, so like drug trafficking cartels or terrorist groups, right? Or human trafficking organizations, they still prefer to use Tether on Tron, Tether on Ethereum, so stable coins that are very, very highly liquid and are pegged to some kind of fiat currency. And they very, very rarely use Monero. But the cyber criminals many times will use Monero, they'll use mixing services, etc. But the way that cryptocurrency really, really evolved throughout the times, and when the first centralized mixing service came around, I think it was like, I don't know, 2013 or 14. It was, to me, that was a really fascinating thing to investigate, because I was like, okay, now they're getting a lot more sophisticated. Now they're making it a lot harder for me to trace, because back then when it first started, they thought, okay, just because it's Bitcoin, just because it's cryptography, now it's anonymous. So they didn't really have to do anything else besides use Bitcoin. But now, then they realized that it's very, very traceable. And law enforcement was just having a field day and identifying Bitcoin users. So they had to change their techniques, and it really progressed to more sophisticated technologies that are being used nowadays, like DeFi, mixing services, and kind of dark web pools of dark web mixing services. Actually, Hydra Market was one of the biggest mixing services or money laundering platforms in the world, which is one of the cases that I was a lead on. But it was a dark web market. So definitely a lot of evolution in this space. And specifically where I saw the biggest change was in 2020. So you had Ethereum came out, so the smart contracts, there was a lot of experimentation with smart contracts.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Sorry, my Siri just decided to listen to me, which is kind of scary. Anyway, so after Ethereum came out, I think the smart contract game really changed everything for everybody. And, we saw the ICO craze, a lot of scams with that. 99% of them went to zero, of course, eventually. And then the NFT craze. And then 2020 is really where I think the tables turned and I saw the biggest change. And it was kind of a perfect storm. It was COVID, so people were sitting at home, including the criminals, and they were trying to find a way to continue their operations and continue laundering money without having to go outside. And with the advent of very liquid stable coins on several chains, it was kind of a perfect storm for a lot of the traditional criminal organizations like drug cartels and terrorist organizations to start using crypto a lot more to launder money and to start looking into crypto and learning it and learning technology, because there is a kind of technical, I guess, barrier to entry for them, especially if they're not cyber experts. So I think that's where everything changed, and the cryptocurrency crime exploded exponentially, and just money laundering and crypto exploded exponentially in the last 3 years, 2020 to 2023. And also with shoddy cybersecurity practices, with a lot of the smart contracts and a lot of the protocols and companies that are building in Web3. I think it gave North Korea an in as well, and it being able to hack into a lot of these protocols and finance their operations. I mean, North Korea has already stolen billions of dollars, right, from crypto companies, and has financed their operations that way. And same thing with terrorist groups, and drug cartels are now exclusively almost looking for cryptocurrency to launder money because of how easily they can do so and how quickly they can do so. And then there's also kind of a broker network that has emerged for laundering money. So especially for cash-based businesses, so picking up cash, dirty cash, and then converting it to crypto and then sending it to the bad guys has become a lot more sophisticated, and there's a much more organized network of brokers that has emerged in that field that made it easier for these organizations to start laundering more money via crypto, and especially China. So China has really emerged as the leader in crypto money laundering, and one of the reasons is because they have very low fees. So they actually charge very low commission fees to the bad guys to launder their money. So they will launder money for many different criminal organizations. And actually China just arrested like over 100 people in these money laundering organizations that have laundered billions of dollars for different crime syndicates, including drug cartels and North Korea, and they don't discriminate. They launder money for anybody and everybody as long as they get their percentage.
It's not too rosy picture you are painting, and especially knowing how many things are structured, right? Like USDT on different chain, and many would say that because of convenience. I think many of the blockchain analytics company would say it's because of the problems with tracing. And then you have the mixing services, all this stuff. So this side is evolving quite aggressively. At the same time, I think the crypto world do not agree that effectively the compliance AML rules and regulation apply to them, and they need to comply with this. So it's not too rosy picture you are painting. So I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be too gloomy, but do you think there's a way out for the industry, or it's actually we are going into the most efficient way, which is the to funnel criminal money through crypto? Which is, traditional finance guys would be saying, this is exactly the point of crypto, right?
I mean, look, I don't think crypto has bore more criminals. There's still the same number of criminals. They're just using different techniques, and crypto is just another technique. And our job in compliance and in law enforcement is to prevent the exploitation of this technology. Right. And make sure that we invest in tools and we invest in training and we stay ahead of it, because if we don't stay ahead of it, we'll be 10 steps behind. We're always a step behind. We're always kind of following on whatever technique that the new technique that they're using, but we can't be 10 steps behind, because then we're not going to be able to get a handle of it. And it's actually an opportunity, because crypto is easier to trace. So if we know what we're doing, we can trace it, we can seize more money, we can, understand better the structures of a lot of these criminal organizations by how the money is moving. So to me, it's an opportunity. We just have to make sure that we take advantage of this opportunity, and we have more training and we have more tools and we invest more into these into combating this illicit use of cryptocurrencies. Because as I mentioned before, and I keep reiterating this, that cryptocurrency itself is not bad, and it's actually good. It was made for the good of humanity. It was made as a hedge against tyranny. That's definitely my opinion, and it's one of the reasons that I really dedicate my life to protecting it from the bad actors that abuse it. And that's what we have to continue doing. We have to focus on that, protecting it from the bad actors that abuse it, and making sure that the technology is available for the purpose that it was created, which is decentralization, which is a hedge against corruption, a hedge against tyranny, right? And it's not easy to understand this if we're born and we grow up in a first world country where we have a lot of comforts. If you're born in a tyrannical or authoritarian country where corruption is pervasive and you can't trust anybody, you can't trust your law enforcement, they're probably your best enemy, like the country that I grew up in. I immigrated to the United States as a child from such a government where corruption was essentially the way of life. You don't trust law enforcement. Something happens to you, you can't call them, they're not going to help you. And it's just a very desperate way to live. And I think, I also lived through hyperinflation, through massive hyperinflation, and I understand what it's like to lose all of your life savings overnight and not be able to do anything about it. The desperation that happens during that time is just unsurmountable. You can't even imagine it when you live in the first world, right? So yeah, that's why I'm so passionate about this field, and I'm so passionate about, preventing bad guys from exploiting this technology so it can actually thrive and it doesn't have this bad reputation or PR. It doesn't get kind of pushed underground, because if we don't also with regulation, if we don't regulate it properly, or if we try to regulate it out of existence completely, it's just going to get pushed underground. And that's not what I want. I want this technology to be accessible to regular people, right? Especially to people that are living in these countries that have, tyrannical or authoritarian regimes where they really have nowhere to turn. So, yeah, that's my opinion on that.
I think that's excellent. I completely, echo what you said. I grew up as well in Poland. So there was corruption, there was, hyperinflation. I went through this, and I remember as a child, one day going and buying for some money, I don't know, some sweets, and the next day, it was impossible to buy. And there was in one day, overnight change. So I completely agree, and I think many of let's say. Western countries forget about how actually what's the purpose of actually crypto for many of those countries. So coming back, I mean, to you mentioned a lot about tools, right? And I think the investigation techniques. Obviously, my background is blockchain analytics and CoinFirm, which I created. Was I know, but you use Chainalysis in DA and in other agencies, and I think TRM Labs would be another one. How do you find this? How do you find these tools? And I think that's one point. And second point is to this question is. I know for fact that many of the, let's say, mixing services, right, or anonymized, or privacy enhanced coins would have some backdoors, effectively, and there's a lot of cooperation between those projects with the agencies. Can you shed some light on this, the tools and techniques?
Sure. So I think originally when I first started, I used a lot of open source tools because there weren't really a lot of commercially available tools to trace cryptocurrency. So actually, Wallet Explorer was the one that I used back then, and then it was bought out by Chainalysis, or the main developer was poached by Chainalysis. So then Wallet Explorer now is not very well maintained or updated. Unfortunately, because it was a really good open source tool. It didn't have the graphing and the visualization that Chainalysis and other tools do, but it was still good as a free resource. But right now, I do really love the direction in which these tools are going. Especially, there's a lot of competition. It's a very saturated market now. There's a lot of different tools that are coming out. A lot of different companies kind of fighting against each other. There's no monopoly anymore. It used to be just Chainalysis, and now there's a lot more tools. So I think this is really good, and this is why I love capitalism for this specific purpose. Is this kind of drive for competition and making a tool better to serve a certain need, right? In this case, it would be for both the private sector and the public sector to be able to trace cryptocurrency. I think there are different features of cryptocurrency tracing that some of these tools focus specifically on, let's say, a specific chain. They're better at a specific chain, or some tools are better at cross-chain tracing or bridge tracing, or even demixing. Some tools have automated demixing. Some tools have manual demixing, like you would buy the tool, and then if you have to demix something, you would have to ask them, hey, can you demix this manually for us? And some tools are really good at smart contract visualization or NFT or asset tracing. So there's a lot of different things that are coming up that I'm really excited about, because I was really challenged by some of the new technology that was coming out in crypto, and that was not immediately addressed by some of these tools. And then they came out with solutions, which I really love to see. And I love the competition, the fact that they're competing against each other. It makes the tools better and cheaper for law enforcement and for the private sector. So I love that. And I think that these tools are great, and they were enough, I think, back then when it was a lot of the crypto crime was dark web and cyber. But now that every case can be a crypto case, literally, it doesn't matter what crime you're investigating, any case can be a crypto case because all of these criminal organizations are now using it to launder money, at least, maybe not to receive payment, but at least to launder money. I think we need a lot more scalable solutions that scale the investigations in law enforcement and also in intelligence collection. And the blockchain analytics tools are great, but they are used when you already know your bad guy is using crypto. You need to have the wallet, you need to have the address to be able to put it into the blockchain analytics tool, right? We need more scalable solutions for what comes before that. How do you find out if your target is using crypto? What crypto are they using, right? What kind of evidence do you have to collect in order to find out if your target is using crypto? How do you find it? How do you find seizable assets? What do you do with the seizable assets? There's a lot of different challenges that are still yet to be solved. And that's one of the reasons that I left and started building my company, is to solve a lot of these challenges that I think the scalability problem that came with crypto exploding into the mainstream and exploding into the criminal world.
And what about, let's say cooperation with or backdoor to some of the mixers? Do you see this? I mean, is it actually happening, or you cannot disclose this information? How is it in practice? I mean, I know for the fact that there is a couple on the market which, when agencies would ask, they would simply give the internal records of transactions, which is like fully auditable.
Well, it really depends. There's no blanket answer to this, and I don't want to give up a lot of the trade-craft. Obviously, it makes it a lot harder for law enforcement to do their job when criminals know what we're up to. But of course, we have to stay on top of what they're doing and the technologies they use to obfuscate their illicit activity. And of course, we look for backdoors. Of course, we look for exploits to potentially get a leg up on a lot of these privacy-based technologies like privacy coins and decentralized mixing services, et cetera. So it's always going to be there. We're always going to look for that. Some of them are good. Some of our techniques are good. Some of them are not very good. Some of them work sometimes. Some of them work, most of the time don't work, but sometimes work. It really depends. But of course, there are techniques and there are heuristics that we use to be able to combat that.
And can you share some insight into the challenges and complexities of investigating cryptocurrency-related crimes, particularly on dark web? And what were some of the memorable cases you work on, if you can share, of course?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges, especially with dark web cases, and a lot of our targets are anonymous. So we don't know who they are. And not only are they anonymous, they don't know many times who their co-conspirators are. So where in traditional crime, the way that you would get to the big wig, so to speak, or the crime lord or the pin, is you would continually flip the low-hanging fruit, right? You would arrest someone and then you flip them against their boss, and then you flip that boss against the other boss. When it comes to dark web cases, many times the co-conspirators, even dark web administrators who've worked together for many years, they're in different countries. They don't know who each other is a lot of the time. So even if you arrest someone and you identify someone and arrest them and you try to flip them against the bigger fish, they don't know who the bigger fish is. And a lot of times you kind of hit a dead end. So you have to target them all separately. There's no kind of a hierarchical structure like there is in traditional criminal investigations. So we have to get really, really creative. We have to do some very, very creative undercover work on the dark web. The good thing is that if they're anonymous on the dark web, so am I. So it's a lot more easier for me to infiltrate the organization if everybody's anonymous, right? It's a lot harder to infiltrate the organization if it's a traditional organization. Then I have to in person go and meet with the bad guys and try to build rapport and try to infiltrate. While on the dark web, it's a lot easier to do because everybody's anonymous and nobody knows that I'm a cop and I can act like whoever I want to act, just like they act whoever they want to act. So it's almost like an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. And also in the case of dark web markets, we don't know where they're located. So of course, there's also the dark web Tor component. So figuring out where the servers are hosted, which is very, very difficult to do. Not impossible, but very difficult. And we've done it in the past, but sometimes it takes many years to figure out where the servers are. So these are some of the challenges. But I think the use of the cryptocurrencies themselves is an advantage to me. I would rather do all day, every day, I would rather do a case where the criminal organization is using crypto than when they're using cash and banking system and everything like that, because I just know how to trace it. And a lot, the issue is many agents and many police officers, they're so afraid of the technology. They think, oh my God, it's crypto. I don't know anything about crypto. So they just get paralyzed and they don't want to do the case.
I think that's the same with the money laundering officers within the cryptocurrencies exchanges. It's a very similar approach. I think I saw many very knowledgeable people going into crypto industry and almost like starting from zero and not knowing like, oh, where do we start with this? We are explaining this is not much different than what you do in traditional finance. You just have one more component which is related to payments, and otherwise it's almost the same work, or it's actually easier because you have like all Swift analyzed if you compare this to traditional banking.
Yeah, exactly. It is easier. And when the light bulb goes off and you realize how much easier it is, it's actually a pretty amazing moment. But yeah, you have to get there, and that's why the scalability part, right? It's not just a handful of geeks in a bank or a handful of geeks in a federal agency that know how to do crypto cases and they're passionate about doing crypto cases and they're passionate about learning the technology. We need to scale it to the point where anybody can do a crypto case and not be afraid of it, right? Like, and I like to say it like make an analogy of being afraid of doing long division. If you're doing long division and now there's a calculator, so now all you do is click and it does it for you. But to me, that's how we should do it. We can't expect everybody to get a degree in cryptography. We can't expect everybody to be technically savvy and really, really be motivated to learn everything there is to know about the technology. And because the technology changes so quickly, it's just not a scalable approach for everybody, for a police officer and an intel analyst and a bank analyst to be able to like really know everything there's to know about cryptocurrency and the emerging technologies that are associated with it. So building the calculator for everybody in crypto is I think the best way to go forward.
You mentioned a couple of times, DeFi and NFT. I mean, do you see them as specific risk or like emerging risk for money laundering in crypto?
Well, I have seen some criminal organizations and money launderers use NFTs, but I just don't know why they use them. And I'm talking specifically for the purpose of money laundering. I don't know why they would use them for the purpose of money laundering, because NFTs are pretty transparent. So there's really no benefit.
Bringing legitimacy to the transaction. I sold NFT, and it happened that someone bought this for $1 million worth of Ethereum or anything else, right? So I think that's one of the things I see happening in terms of legitimizing this funds. So that would be really easy.
It's just risky because if you buy an NFT with your illicit proceeds, you don't know if you're going to be able to sell it for the same amount or more or less. You don't know. It's a lot risky. It's the same problem that they had with with Ethereum and with Bitcoin back in the day, when I was wondering why aren't they using Bitcoin and Ethereum more? It's just so amazing for transferring value across borders in an anonymous way. I think it's the same reason, because of the volatility. So I see that they're experimenting with it. I don't see NFTs being used that much in money laundering. I think maybe in the metaverse, I'm seeing a lot more use for money laundering with digital assets within the metaverse. But it's very similar to how money laundering is being used with like casinos and also online gaming as well, because online gaming has had kind of internal payment systems for a long time, even before crypto was created, so that were used to launder money by some organizations. So I don't see NFTs as being like the really big threat or one of the big main ways that these organizations are laundering money, but I think they're definitely experimenting with it. And of course, when you think about rug pulls and all that kind of stuff, of course, NFTs, just like ICOs, are prime target for that kind of stuff.
And considering what's happening especially in the US in terms of changing regulatory landscape and the regulators going after the crypto market, what do you think is happening at the moment in the US, and what would be your, let's say, policy recommendation or changes to which you believe are necessary for the crypto market to grow, and maybe for the investigations to be easier as well?
So from my perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm probably not the best person to answer this question in a very in-depth way. But from my perspective and my experience, I think that the switch from proactive regulation, the switch from regulation by enforcement to more proactive regulation is definitely needed here, right? And I understand why regulation by enforcement happens. It's a lot of it is lack of resources in the government to be able to address the explosion of crypto and technology, and how, all the different facets and the stable coins and the NFTs and the DeFi and the mixing services. There's like so many things, right, that keep coming up every 5 seconds. It's really hard to be writing legislation for it as it's coming up. So a lot of times it's just like, okay, this looks wrong based on the regulatory framework that we have applied to it, the existing regulatory framework that we applied to it. So let's go after this particular, wrongdoing, so to speak, in court. So I'm hoping that there's going to be more proactive regulation that happens. And I'm hoping that the proactive regulation doesn't stifle innovation. I'm a big fan of sandboxes, right? Allowing protocols and businesses to experiment before really bringing down the hammer with regulation on them. So that would be one of my, I guess, recommendations, is sandboxes. And also, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of lack of clarity when it comes to, especially in the US, which agency is responsible for which crypto and which asset. It's very frustrating, I think. And it looks like they're fighting each other about whose jurisdiction a specific crypto type is. In my ideal world, I think I would like to see a separate regulatory body for digital assets, because I think they are sufficiently different, but I don't think we're going to see that, unfortunately. But yeah, just more clear kind of divides and who is regulating what, so that companies know what to do when they're starting their businesses. And for governments, invest more in training, invest more in tools, invest more in scalability and automation tools to be able to address the bad things that are happening in crypto. Because if we don't do that, then our countries and our regulators are just going to say, okay, this is bad, let's just ban it. And we don't want that. We don't want to just ban it. We want to make sure that we specifically target the exploitation of these technologies by the bad actors, but don't at the same time stifle the innovation that's coming out of this technology. So it's kind of a fine line to walk at this point.
And you said that you are a big proponent of let's say crypto in general. And where do you think the next phase of growth will be coming from? What do you see on the market? What is exciting from your perspective?
So, I think usability, the user experience needs to be a lot more streamlined and a lot more exponentially better than the alternative. You're not going to drive adoption of the use of cryptocurrency if it's not exponentially better than the alternative, right? It's that 10x rule. So in first world countries, we still have PayPal, we still have Venmo, and people are pretty content with using these technologies still for transfer of value. So there's not a lot of motivation and drive for people to use crypto and learn about the technology, besides speculation and, to the moon, I'm going to get rich tomorrow, which, I don't think it's the best motivator. I think we need to really develop those use cases. And, these use cases really need to come out a lot more clearly and in the industry. And we need to sift through the noise of you're going to get rich and that's why you should invest in crypto. That shouldn't be why we invest in crypto. That shouldn't be why we experiment with crypto, right? So I think the next big thing is just building better user interface, user experience, making crypto actually easier to use and better than the alternative for the everyday person. I think that's where we need to focus our energy. And also decentralization. I think most crypto is not decentralized, unfortunately. And we need to pay more attention to that because that's the biggest facet of cryptocurrency and the biggest advantage. And if we don't fight for decentralization, then what's the point?
I couldn't agree more. I think, I'm very much surprised that there is a couple of really large projects, worth of billions, and the user experience is not even comparable to existing, market solution in traditional finance. Is just much, much worse, So, yeah. So on this note, thank you very much, Lili. It was excellent. I really like you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Crypto Compliance, brought to you by Gate Knox.